Eleanor Drake was a woman who commanded silence in every boardroom, a CEO whose decisions shaped entire industries. Yet at home, her silence was powerless against the one that haunted her most, her 6-year-old daughter Ava, who had never spoken a word. Years of therapy, endless appointments, and sleepless nights had left Eleanor both exhausted and desperate. She'd learned to interpret her daughter's every glance and gesture, but she longed to hear her voice. One ordinary Saturday at a crowded playground, Eleanor's world shifted. A stranger knelt in the sand beside Eva, and in that fragile moment, silence finally broke. The playground was alive with sound. Children's laughter rose like music. The creak of swings blended with the shrill squeal of the merry-go-round, and parents called after their little ones with a mix of joy and exasperation. Eleanor stood at the edge of it all, feeling as though she'd walked into another world. Dressed in a cream wool coat and leather heels that looked absurd against the mulch, she stood out among the sneakers and yoga pants, her presence drawing a few curious glances. But she wasn't here to blend in. She was here for Ava. Ava clutched Eleanor's hand tightly, her small knuckles pale against her mother's. In the other hand, she held her stuffed cat, worn from years of being carried everywhere. Ava's eyes roamed the playground with quiet longing. Eleanor knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Do you want to try the swings, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Ava didn't answer, as always, but she nodded, the barest dip of her chin. Eleanor guided her to the swing and helped her sit. She pushed gently, watching the corners of Ava's lips tug upward into the faintest smile. Eleanor's heart clenched. That tiny smile was everything, but still silence pressed between them. 6 years of silence. 6 years of hearing nothing from her daughter but the sound of breath and footsteps. Eleanor had learned to accept it, or at least pretend to. She told herself she didn't need words to love her daughter. But in the quiet of the night, when skyscrapers loomed around her apartment, she'd press her palms to her eyes and imagine what Ava's voice might sound like. A burst of laughter startled her, and Eleanor looked up. A boy about Ava's age ran toward the slide, his sneakers sending up dust, his grin wide. Behind him followed a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-browned skin and a T-shirt that looked like it had been washed too many times. His jeans were faded, his boots scuffed, but his posture was easy, confident. He didn't carry himself like the polished men Eleanor encountered at galas or board meetings. He carried himself like someone grounded, someone who belonged here. The boy dashed to the swings and plopped down on the one next to Ava. She froze, fingers tightening on her stuffed cat, eyes darting nervously to Eleanor. The man came closer, crouching low in front of his son, then glanced toward Ava with a kind smile. "Hey there," he said softly. "I'm Daniel. That's my boy Max. He's a little loud sometimes, but he means well." Where Eleanor opened her mouth, ready to explain, to warn him, to apologize for what wouldn't come from Ava's lips. But then something happened. Ava blinked, clutched her cat tighter, and whispered a single word so faint Eleanor almost missed it. "Hey?" Her entire world froze. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Her hand gripped the swing chain until her knuckles whitened. She turned to Ava, certain she'd imagined it. But Ava's lips had moved, her voice, fragile, trembling, had filled the air with a single syllable. Daniel smiled as though nothing extraordinary had happened, his eyes kind. "Hi," he echoed gently. Max leaned toward Ava, grinning. "Want to swing with me?" Ava's cheeks flushed. She didn't speak again, but she nodded just barely. Max kicked his legs, pumping higher, and Ava watched him. Eleanor was still rooted to the spot, her chest tight. She had spent thousands on therapists, endured endless explanations, heard developmental delay. So many times she hated the phrase, and yet it was here, in a noisy playground, in front of a stranger in worn boots, that her daughter spoke. Daniel stood, brushing the dust from his hands, and offered Eleanor a small smile. "She's sweet," he said. She managed a stiff nod, her voice shaky. "That's the first time she's ever—" She trailed off, unable to finish. Daniel's brows lifted, understanding dawning in his eyes. "First time." Eleanor swallowed hard and nodded again. He didn't react with shock or pity, only quiet respect. "That's a big step," he said. "Sometimes kids just need the right spark." They sat on the bench nearby as the children swung side by side. Daniel introduced himself properly. He was a carpenter, widowed for 3 years, raising Max alone. Eleanor found herself listening more intently than she expected. He spoke with an ease that unsettled her, no need for pretense or posturing. She, in turn, revealed more than she normally would, that Ava had been silent since birth, that she carried the weight of boardrooms by day and the heavier weight of silence by night. Daniel didn't try to fix her, didn't offer empty reassurances. He simply listened, nodding when appropriate, watching Max with a tenderness that made Eleanor's chest ache. She couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at her not as a CEO, not as a headline, but as a mother. When it was time to leave, Ava tugged Eleanor's sleeve. She leaned close, her lips parting again. "Come back," she whispered. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She crouched, cupping her daughter's face, whispering back, "We will." And when she rose, Daniel was smiling softly. Same time next week. The following Saturday, Eleanor herself back at the playground, this time in sneakers and a simple sweater instead of heels and tailored wool. Ava skipped slightly ahead of her, clutching her stuffed cat, but walking with more eagerness than Eleanor had seen in years. The sight alone made Eleanor's heart feel light. Daniel was already there, Max hanging upside down from the monkey bars, laughing. When he spotted them, his face lit with genuine warmth, and Eleanor felt an unfamiliar flutter in her stomach. They fell into easy conversation as the children played. Over the weeks that followed, it became a ritual. Saturday mornings were theirs. Ava began to say more, little fragments of words. "Slide! Swing! Cat! Max!" Each syllable was a gift, and each time Eleanor's eyes filled with grateful tears. Daniel never made a show of it. He simply encouraged, gently, patient in a way Eleanor admired. One afternoon, as Ava and Max built a crooked sandcastle, Eleanor confessed quietly, "I used to think I could control everything. That if I worked hard enough, paid enough, planned enough, I could fix it all. But I couldn't fix this." Daniel leaned back on the bench, his gaze thoughtful. "Some things don't need fixing. They just need time and love." His words sank into her, unraveling knots she hadn't realized she'd tied around her heart. Eleanor began to notice things about him. The way his laughter came easily, the way his hands, though rough, were gentle when he tied Max's shoelaces, the way he looked at her as though he saw beyond her polished exterior. He didn't care about boardrooms or headlines. He cared about his son, about moments, about presence. And for the first time in years, Eleanor began to wonder what it might feel like to let someone in. It was late autumn when the air turned crisp and leaves scattered across the playground. Ava, cheeks pink from the chill, ran after Max with delighted giggles. The sound startled Eleanor even now, each laugh a reminder of how far her daughter had come. She sat beside Daniel, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he'd brought her. "Do you realize," she said softly, "that before you she never spoke a word? Not one." Daniel glanced at her, his expression warm. She had it in her all along. She just needed someone to hear her. Eleanor's throat tightened. She thought of all the nights she'd sat alone in her penthouse, staring at her silent daughter, feeling like she was failing her in every possible way. And yet here, on a park bench, with a carpenter beside her and children laughing in the distance, she felt something she hadn't in years: hope. As the sun dipped lower, Ava came running, breathless, tugging at Eleanor's coat. "Mama," she said clearly, her voice trembling but strong. Eleanor froze, tears springing to her eyes as the word wrapped around her like a miracle. She knelt, pulling Ava into her arms, laughing through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart. Mama's here." Daniel looked away respectfully, giving them the moment. But when Eleanor met his gaze again, her walls had cracked completely. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me this." He shook his head gently. "It wasn't me. It was her. And you." But Eleanor knew better. Sometimes life brought people together at the exact moment you needed them most. And as she watched Ava and Max chase each other through a flurry of leaves, Eleanor felt the beginnings of something she hadn't dared to dream of. Love, not just for her daughter's new voice, but for the man who had helped her hear it. And in that crisp autumn air, for the first time in a long time, Eleanor believed she wasn't alone anymore.